Hello everyone, welcome to the last video of this week's videos. In this video I want to focus on creating a simple web page, and I want to make this in sort of an assignment video. So I'm first going to explain the goal and show you what we're going to make. Then I'm going to take a little pause so you can click pause on the video and try it out yourself to make it first. And once you've given it a try, or once you thought it out how you would do it, they can resume the video and we can create it together, or you can see how I create it. And I think it's good to first try it yourself so that you can actively work on your skills and try to figure out how you would do it and then learn from how I do it. So let's first start with the assignment. And in this assignment, I'm only going to try to use the things we have covered in the past two videos. Might be that here and there I explained some new things because I already realized that I forgot to mention some things in the other videos. So keep watching. The assignment. Create a simple, I was thinking to create a simple news website, news website in HTML. So basically create the structure for a simple news website in HTML. Then add styling to the page in a separate CSS file. Basically, that's the assignment, to create a simple news website. To not be completely stuck on how complex it should be, I made a small example. So I was thinking to add a title of the news website, for example, New York Times, then two articles, one article, every article has an image, a title, a date, some content, and then the second article also has an image, a title, a date, some content, and then in the footer we have a small footnote, who made this website, for example. So nothing too complex. So, since you also have homework to do for next week, I think it's more important to put your energy in that one. And that will also be a bit more complex than this simple assignment. But I would like it if you wouldn't just copy what I created here, so this simple news website, but to add some extra styling, like make it a nice background, or add some extra spacing, or some borders, or maybe a background image. Make it a bit personal, or design it like how you would like a news website to look like, because this is of course very simple and empty. And it would then be very cool to share a screenshot of what you created in the comments of the video, but let's talk about it later. So that's the assignment. Create a simple news website in HTML, add styling in a separate CSS file. Then I'm now going to break a little bit so that you can pause the video and then try it out yourself. Try to make this and try to think it out first and try to make it, write the HTML structure, and then add CSS on top of that. Then afterwards you can compare how you did the HTML structure to how I did the HTML structure, and maybe you'll see that your structure is better, or that maybe some things in my structure make more sense than how you did it. It's the best way to learn is to compare your own work to how someone else does it. So pause the video and try it out. And then I hope that break should be long enough. So then I will now also create this website, and you can see how I do it and maybe learn from it, I hope. So first of all, I open git bash. Or if you're on Mac OS X, you would open the terminal. Then we always start in our home directory. So I go to my Hack Your Future folder I created. And I see what's in there. There's a CSS demo. So I create a new directory and I say news website. So I do that with mkdir. Then I go into this new directory with cd. Then I create already an index.html using touch index.html, and I also create a CSS file already. So now there's two files, and then I open Visual Studio Code by opening code space dot to open the current folder in Visual Studio Code. So there we are, there's the HTML file. So let's just first start with the HTML structure and do the CSS later. So in the HTML file I can type HTML, at least once Visual Studio Code started completely. I can type HTML, and then I get the suggestion for HTML5 so that I have the whole HTML structure directly. Let's fill in the title. I'm gonna call my news website the Amsterdam Times. Okay, and then the structure. So let's look at the example I showed. It has a title, then it has some two articles which also have a title and a content and a date, and then there's a footer. So this title, it's the name of the website, so it suggests that it's in the header, that it's visible on every page, a bit like a logo. So I'm gonna add a header element. Then there is some content of the web page, which I'm gonna put in an element called main, and then I add a footer element for the footnote. Then in the header, I have to think, this is a title, a very important title, and there's two other titles. Since these two titles are not the most important titles, because they are equally important, there's not one most important title, I'm going to make this one my most important title. So I make this logo title, I make it my H1. I type there Amsterdam Times. And then let's also add the footer directly, so I can create a paragraph in the footer and say, this website is brought to you by Future. Then in my main, so there's 2 times a news article here. So it would not be smart to now just start putting an image here, so I'm going to put something around it. And I know there's an HTML tag called article, which fits really well for this, but maybe we should also look at which HTML elements there are, which are called semantic HTML elements. So they describe the content of this element. For example, header or footer or article, they describe that this is the place where the header goes, this is the place where an article goes. So if I Google semantic HTML elements, then I see on W3 schools, they have a list here, and here we can see all the different semantic HTML elements there are. So for example, article, the one I said, and they also show here a nice demo of how you can use it. So for example, also the nav, which we used in the other video. I'm not going to use it in this case because we don't have a navigation. Maybe a news website should have a navigation, but we're not doing it this time. So I use the article semantic HTML element. Then there's an image first. There is a title. Then we have the date. Well, let's first do the content. So a trick for the content, if you don't want to type out actual text, you can type lorem, and then Visual Studio Code gives you this suggestion. And if you click on it, it just adds some random text in here. It doesn't really look like anything. I think it's supposed to look like Latin or something. Or no, it should supposed to look like English. Well, I don't know. It's a sort of a random text. And then there is the date. And I saw here this time element. Maybe this is a good one to use for the date. So it says over here, defines a date, a time. How to define a time and a date. yeah, so we can add this around our, maybe we can use this as our for our date time HTML element. So we say here time, and then we say 16 June 2020. So here we have one article. Now we're just missing the image, and I'm just gonna steal the image from the one from the example I gave. So I go to this image, but you also saw it before in the video, in an earlier video. You can go to any website and you can just do a right click on an image and then save the image as, and then save it in the folder where you are creating your website, and I call this one Hack Your Future. So now if I go to Visual Studio Code, it doesn't show up here, but if I click the refresh icon, well, there it is already. There's now hackyourfuture.jpg. So I can type here hackyourfuture.jpg, and then it should be visible. I'm also going to go ahead and immediately add the second article. So I'm going to save this image as well. So add some content to the second article, and then this should be the whole structure of the news website. So we have a header with a title, then we have a main part with two articles in there which all have an image, a title, a time, a date, and some content, and the second article, and a footer which has some text. So now we can open this in our browser. So I click here, reveal in, I do a right click and then reveal in File Explorer. Then the File Explorer opens, and then you can either double click your file or just drag it into your browser. So now it looks like this, Amsterdam Times, and a huge image of Wouter clapping. Then some small text here, and then another huge image, and some other text again. So the content is there, but it doesn't look very user-friendly yet or very pretty. So the next step is to add some CSS. So we already have the style.css, which is empty currently. So just to make sure that to check if it works in a bit, I'm just gonna add here body and background color red. Because otherwise it might be that you have the feeling your CSS doesn't work, but maybe you didn't link it correctly. So you add a link element here with a rel is style sheet and an href attribute going to style.css, and we close this tag immediately. So if I now refresh, it has a red background, so the CSS, at least it's linked correctly together. So then I'm gonna define, what I always do is first define the font I'm gonna use and make it the right size, because now it's very small. I would like to use for my normal text Arial, and then maybe a font size of 15 pixels. Yeah, that looks good. Maybe a bit bigger still. Yeah, that's very readable. And then we see these images, they are currently very big. And what's interesting is that the image, it just grows. It's currently the size of the image itself. So this image is 2000 pixels. So also on my screen it will be 2000 pixels, which is even bigger than my screen is. So it goes out of my screen. So often it's good for images to say max width 100%, which means that the image, it will now not be bigger than the element in which it is. So it's now, it's then in an article element, and the article element, it's not going to be bigger than the screen, or sorry, yeah. In the end, it's not going to be bigger than the screen because the body is only the screen size. So the image is going to fill the whole screen, but that's it. But if I now make the article, if I make the article, for example, a width of 500 pixels, then the image will also be 500 pixels. So this is a nice way to make sure that an image never grows too big when you use a very big image. I don't want to make my article 500 pixels wide, so let's not do that. Alright, but what I would like to do is to make it like in the example that the whole website is a certain width. And that it is in the middle of the web page, of the browser. So for that, I could do one thing. I could just say for my body, I could say max width, let's say 700 pixels. So this works. Now the whole page became a bit smaller, but it's better to not use the body for this, because it could be that in the future I want to add a background image. And if I add the background image now to the body, okay, this is surprising. I would have thought that the background image would be small now. Sometimes I get surprised myself when I make something. Interesting. Yeah, okay, either way, I'm not sure why, but this still works to add the background image to the body, which I'm not gonna do though. And I would in general advise to not give your body a max width, but to add an element around your content. So I can create a div here, which is a general HTML element and doesn't have a special meaning. I put it around all the content in my page, and I give the class called container. Then in my CSS, I can say container max width 700 pixels, and then it has the same effect. So now the content, it's also 700 pixels. Then I want this content to be in the middle. And for this, there's a small trick, I would call it, although it's also sort of logical. To make an element go in the middle, sometimes you can give it a margin 0 auto, which means that in the top and in the bottom, it doesn't have a margin, so there's no spacing. And on the left and the right, there's a margin auto. How do I explain this? Which means that the browser will try to make the margins equally on both sides. So now the element, it jumps to the middle because the margin on both sides, it's going to be equal. So in the end, it will be in the middle, because if there's a margin of 300 pixels on the right and on the left, then it will appear in the middle. The nice thing is, if I now make my browser window a bit smaller, it still stays in the middle and it also shrinks. And it moves along with the browser window being smaller. And another nice thing to show maybe already is that when I scale my browser window to be smaller, the image now also scales with it, and also the container. So I made this container, which has a certain width, but I said max width. So it's not going to be bigger than 700 pixels, but it can be smaller than 700 pixels. So here you see it's actually smaller than 700 pixels. But the nice thing is that when someone on a mobile phone looks at this website, the website will still be readable. You wouldn't have to scroll to the right or to the left to read the text. So that's something to keep in mind, to try to use, for example, max width instead of width, so that then things scale nicely. If someone with a smaller screen or a mobile device visits your website, that things still fit on the screen. So I put it in the center, and it has a max width to be one nice column. Let's now make this first title a bit nicer. I'm actually called the Amsterdam Times to sound even more important. So then I take the H1 and I give it a font size. So now I could type a font size of 72 pixels, for example, and then it becomes rather big. But there's another way to define the size of a font, which is a bit more user-friendly, especially for people. It's a bit user-friendly or for accessibility, as that's called. Sometimes people define in their operating system or in their browser that they want the fonts to be a bit bigger. Like my parents, they don't read so well, and they have classes. They do that, for example, and then if I now would say here, this font is going to be 30 pixels, then even if someone increased the font size, it's going to be 30 pixels. But what we would like is that if they increase their font size, that this text would also increase its font size, so that the text would also for them be readable. So what we can then do is to say, this text, I want it to be 1 rem. Now don't ask me what a rem stands for. I'm not sure. But what this means, that 1 rem, it's gonna be the same size as the base font size, the font size of the root element of the website, which is, for example, the body tag. So it's sort of gonna look to the parent element and then see, this font size, it's so big, so this is gonna be equal because it's 1. If I make it 2 rem, then it's gonna be twice the font size of this root element. So this would be translated to twice 17 pixels times 2. That is 34 pixels. If I make it 3, it would be 3 times 17 pixels. I can also do 2.5 to make it something in between. And then if someone would increase its font size, then this title, it would also increase its font size. So maybe here I can say 3 times the normal font size. No, that's not big enough. 4 times, and I'm also gonna give it a different font family to make it look more like a newspaper. I give it the font Georgia. That's a bit too big, and I also want it to be in the center, so I use text align center to center the text in the middle. And there we have it, the Amsterdam Times. All right, and also the font of the article, I would like to change it a bit. This is an H2, so in the H2 I say font size 2 rem maybe, and then I also would like to use Georgia there to make it look like a newspaper. I don't want to align it in the center. Yes. Then the date I want to be a bit of a lighter color. So I give the time element, I give it a color of maybe something like this. No, even a bit lighter. So I know that when I use 666 or 777 or AAA, that it's going to be either gray or white or blackish. And I know that 777 is a certain lightish gray. So that already looks a bit better. Now I would like to be able that the articles are a bit more visually separated, because now it's not clear if this text belongs to this article or to this picture. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my article and I'm going to say to give it a margin bottom of 30 pixels. So if you remember from the other video, margin bottom means that every article, which is around this HTML element, it's going to have some spacing in the bottom. So if I now refresh, some spacing appeared there, but it's very small. So I make it a bit bigger. Yes, and maybe it would be nice if there would be a small border to make even more clear that there is what belongs together. All right. This looks a bit strange though, that the text is so close to the border of this element. So I would like to put all this text a little bit from the border, but this image is actually nice that it touches the border. So what I'm going to do, I could either give all these elements a separate padding left, padding right, and then this element a padding bottom. But instead, what I'm going to do is put an element around it. So around all the text content, I'm going to say add a div, which is an element which doesn't have a meaning necessarily, and I'm going to say text content. So now I add some HTML structure to support my CSS styling. So it's not that you always just create the HTML first and then afterwards you add the CSS. Sometimes you need to add some HTML to be able to write more efficient CSS. So I could now write .css content, text content. But you might realize that text content, it's a slightly generic class name. It could be that later on I expand this news website and I add another element with the class text content, and then it would also pick up this styling. So to be sure that I'm only styling this element, I do article.textContent. The chance is smaller that I make another article which also has a text content element inside. And then here I can say padding 30 pixels. And there we go, some spacing appears. But then here there's a lot of spacing between the image and the title. So let's see what's going on there. And if I do right mouse button click and inspect, we see that if I hover the H2, it has a lot of margin or padding in the top and the bottom. This is orange highlighted color. So if I go to compute it, I can actually see that the margin, it's 26.5 pixels, I assume. So what I can do is maybe disable the margin in the top. And then maybe it's also best to only do it for this article. So I say article, H2, and then margin top 0, and margin bottom, I would like to be 15 pixels. There we go, that already looks better. We're getting close actually to the assignment. Oh, it's actually wider there. Well, just the footer, it still looks a bit strange, this text here. So I'm gonna say footer element. There's a P in it. I'm gonna say text align center. And I'm gonna make the font size a bit smaller than the normal font size. So I'm gonna say 0.5 rem. So it's going to be half the size of the other text on the website. Okay, that's very tiny. You can hardly read it. So let's say 0.75. Yeah, that looks good. And we give it a font style italic. And now it sticks very much to the bottom of the screen. So I would also give the footer a margin bottom of 30 pixels, or maybe 60. There we go. That looks good, I think. It is kind of like this. Maybe I can make the background of the body, give the body a slight background color. So very light gray is that, hardly visible. And maybe a cool one to add is to add rounded corners to the articles. So in the article I can say border radius of 4 pixels. And now you see that it has these tiny rounded corners, which makes it look a bit more fancy. But what you might also notice is that here the corner, it's nice and round, but in the top right of the article, the picture actually sort of overlaps the corner. And to fix that, I have to say overflow hidden in my article, which means that everything which accidentally goes out of the article HTML element, it will be hidden, you won't see it. And now you will see that the corners of the image, they are not visible anymore. I think this looks good, but maybe the text is a bit too close together, so I could say maybe in my article paragraph, I could give a line height. The line height changes how far the lines are apart, and a 1.5 line height, I think it makes the line height 1.5 times bigger as the font size. So this is the Amsterdam Times. It doesn't look very Amsterdam-y though. Huh? Maybe we can add a cool Amsterdam skyline image. Let's see if we can find something cool. Let's try to use this one. Of course, we're not supposed to just steal images from other websites. So if I would publish this website, I would not do this. But sometimes for something like this, it's okay. Background, so I can save a background image. Save the background image, and now I could say, if I want my body to have a background image, I can say background image background.jpg. Now the text gets red, so this already gives me a warning that something is wrong. I forgot to type URL. So now it should have a background image. Yes, this looks very not nice. And I think what you can then do, background repeat, no repeat, because we see now that here it shows the image, and then here there's a line and it shows the image another time. I want to show it only one time, so I say no repeat. And then I want it to be in the bottom of the page, so I could say background position bottom, I think. Yeah, so now it sticks to the bottom. And I think I can also say background size contain, so that it doesn't become bigger than the page. So now it's nice and small. But now it looks a bit weird that this is light gray and this is blue. So maybe what I can do, if I inspect the background, yeah, then instead of using the background color, this gray, I can click on it so that I can edit it. And then I use this color picker, as it's called. It's a pipette, it's called in Dutch, I'm not sure how that's called in English. If you click on it, then you can use it on the, it was automatically selected. And on the page you can select a color you would like to use. So I could, for example, use this bush here, and then the color would be brown. But I could also pick this blue of the background in the bottom. Oh, I now see that it has sort of a gradient, so I can never pick the exact right color. Let's try to pick something in between. Well, let's say we pick this. So I pick this color, and then I can copy it here, because I have to save it as well in my CSS. And then I can remove the old background color. Then what we see, that the articles, they don't have they also have a blue background, but I would actually like the articles to have a white background. So in the article I add a background color white. Well, this looks very Amsterdam Timesy. So that was my nice design of the news website, and I hope you also made something very creative. If not, try to make it a bit more creative, and I would like to see some screenshots in the comments on the video or on Slack. Try to share something cool. Then this was the last video of this week, of the collection of videos of this week. I think this will also be explained in other ways, but make sure to look into the homework. So if you go to the GitHub page of this module, of the HTML CSS module, if you then scroll down, you should have already have read the reading material. Here's also the homework. And in the homework, I think it needs to be finished before the next Thursday, which would be, if you watch this video, the 23rd of June. And in the homework, it has assignments about the command line, about CSS, and in the end, you will make a digital resume. So also on web page, like we did with the news website, but then about your resume. And I'm just gonna repeat it already, say it again. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments on the video or on Slack. And yes, I will say this, I will emphasize this. Make sure to ask questions. If anything is not clear, or if you would like some clarification, make sure to ask it, because that's the best way for you to learn, but also your classmates can learn from your question. So even if you think that maybe this question is not so important, still ask it, because then maybe someone else can learn from it. And then I think on Sunday there will be a question hour, or a couple of hours where everybody can submit questions, and we go over the questions, and maybe we show some code or explain some things in more detail. Then that was it. Thank you for watching, and see you probably on Sunday then.